When Samuel Green, a former police officer with a troubled past, takes a job as a hospital security guard to support his young daughter, he thinks he's found a fresh start with simple, clear-cut rules. But when he confronts a casually dressed black woman in a restricted area who can't produce ID, his by-the-book approach backfires spectacularly. The woman he tried to remove from the surgical wing? Dr. Diana Watson, Chief of Surgery. Now facing the consequences of his mistake, Samuel must confront uncomfortable questions about bias, belonging, and whether following rules is always the right thing to do. What begins as a tense confrontation will take both Samuel and Dr. Watson on an unexpected journey that reveals deeper truths about judgment, compassion, and seeing people for who they truly are. Samuel Green took a deep breath as he stood in front of City Memorial Hospital. The building was huge, with rows of windows that caught the morning sun. His new security guard uniform felt stiff and a little too tight around the neck, but he straightened his back anyway. After 15 years as a police officer, this wasn't the job he had pictured for himself. But things hadn't gone as planned. "It's just a fresh start," he whispered to himself. A new day. He thought about his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, who had hugged him extra tight this morning. "You'll do great, Dad," she had said. Since losing her mom 2 years ago, Lily had become his little cheerleader. Samuel needed this job, not just for the money, but to show Lily that even when life knocks you down, you get back up. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. Inside, the hospital buzzed with activity. Nurses rushed past with clipboards. Visitors wandered, looking lost. Doctors talked in serious voices. The smell of coffee mixed with hand sanitizer filled the air. Samuel walked to the security office, where his new boss waited. Mike Tanner was a big man with a friendly smile that didn't quite reach his tired eyes. "Green! Right on time. Good man." Mike shook Samuel's hand firmly. "Let's get you set up with your badge and radio. Then I'll show you around." As they walked, the halls, Mike pointed out different areas. Emergency room is always chaos, but that's normal. Cafeteria on the second floor has decent coffee. Third floor is pediatrics. Kids everywhere, so extra patience needed there. Samuel nodded, trying to remember everything. The hospital was like a small city, with so many different people working together. He noticed doctors and nurses from all kinds of backgrounds, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, all rushing to help patients. "Main thing to remember," Mike said, tapping his temple, "is to trust your gut about who belongs and who doesn't. Some folks come in here looking for drugs or to steal stuff while everyone's busy. Your job is to spot the ones who don't fit in." Samuel frowned slightly. During his police years, he'd learned that "doesn't fit in" could mean different things to different people. Sometimes innocent people got caught in that net. "I prefer to just check IDs and follow protocols," Samuel said carefully. Mike shrugged. Sure. Protocols are important, but you'll develop an eye for trouble." They reached a restricted area where doctors performed surgeries. A sign read, "Authorized personnel only." "This is one of our most important spots to watch," Mike explained. "Only doctors, nurses, and certain staff can come through here. Everyone must wear their ID badges at all times." Samuel nodded. "Makes sense. Clear rules are good." After the tour, Samuel began his first shift. He walked the halls, learning the rhythm of the hospital. He helped an elderly woman find her husband's room. He directed a lost delivery person to the supply area. He checked that doors that should be locked were actually locked. Around lunchtime, Samuel sat in the cafeteria with his sandwich. A group of doctors sat nearby, talking about a difficult surgery. One of them, A black woman with braided hair pulled back neatly spoke with authority as the others listened closely. The procedure was successful, but we need to watch for signs of infection, she said. The other doctors nodded respectfully. As Samuel ate his lunch, he watched people come and go. Everyone seemed to know their purpose, rushing to help patients or running tests or delivering supplies. He felt a small bubble of pride knowing he was part of this important place now, helping keep everyone safe. Later that afternoon, Samuel helped security check visitors' bags at the main entrance. Most people were understanding, but some got annoyed. "Sir, I need to see inside that backpack," Samuel said to a young man who tried to walk past. "I'm just bringing my mom her stuff," the man grumbled. "I understand, but it's for everyone's safety," Samuel explained calmly. The man finally unzipped his bag, revealing only clothes and toiletries. By the end of his 12-hour shift, Samuel's feet ached, but he felt good. As he waited for the bus home, he called Lily, who was staying with their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. "How was your day, Dad?" Lily asked excitedly. "It was good, kiddo. Busy, but good. The hospital is huge." He smiled, hearing the happiness in her voice. "How was school?" "We're learning about the human heart in science class. Did you know it pumps blood through your whole body all the time?" Samuel chuckled. "Is that right? Maybe you'll be a doctor someday." "Maybe," Lily said thoughtfully. "Mrs. Rodriguez made spaghetti. I saved you some. You're the best. I'll be home soon." Samuel put his phone away as the bus arrived. The job wasn't what he had planned, but it was honest work. No split-second decisions that could ruin lives, no moments that would keep him up at night, replaying what he could have done differently. Just clear rules to follow. As the bus pulled away from City Memorial Hospital, Samuel watched the building grow smaller in the window. Tomorrow would be another day of helping people and keeping them safe. A simple job with simple rules. That's what he needed right now. If only he knew how complicated things would soon become. 2 weeks into his new job, Samuel had settled into a comfortable routine. He knew most of the day shift nurses by name. He could direct visitors to almost any department without checking the map. He even figured out which vending machine didn't steal your money when you wanted a chocolate bar. Tonight was different, though. Samuel had switched to night shift to cover for another guard who was sick. The hospital felt like a different place after dark. The bright, busy hallways became dim and quiet. Every footstep echoed. The friendly buzz of daytime turned into the mysterious. Beeps from machines and the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes on the shiny floor. "Night shift is mostly quiet," Mike had told him, "but you gotta stay extra alert. That's when strange things happen." At 11:30 p.m., Samuel was making his rounds on the 4th floor, the surgical wing with its restricted areas. Most of the operating rooms were dark and empty this late, except for emergency surgeries. Samuel's radio crackled. "All units, be advised. We have ambulances incoming with 3 car crash victims, ETA 5 minutes. The quiet hospital suddenly kicked into action. Samuel watched as nurses and doctors appeared from break rooms and offices, preparing for the emergency. He stepped aside, staying out of their way while keeping an eye on security. That's when he noticed her. A woman in jeans and a black sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She walked purposefully toward the restricted surgical area. No white coat, no scrubs, no visible ID badge. Samuel frowned. Hospital rules were clear. Everyone needed visible identification, especially in restricted areas, even doctors. He approached her as she punched a code into the security pad by the door. "Excuse me, ma'am," Samuel said politely. "I need to see your hospital ID, please." The woman barely glanced at him. "Not now. I'm in a hurry." She pushed the Daughter open and kept walking. Samuel followed her through the door. This wasn't right. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I need to see your ID badge. It's hospital policy." She sighed loudly, still walking. "I'm a doctor. I need to check on a patient before surgery." Samuel looked at her casual clothes. No stethoscope, no medical tools. Nothing that screamed doctor to him. "I understand, but I still need to see your ID," he insisted, keeping pace beside her. "I don't have time for this," she said, her voice sharp with annoyance. "There's an emergency coming in. I left my badge in my office, and I need to check my patient's latest test results before they go into surgery." Samuel hesitated. There was, indeed, an emergency happening. But rules were rules, and this was exactly the kind of situation security was meant to handle. Anyone could claim to be a doctor. "I'm sorry, but without proper identification, you can't be in this restricted area. I can escort you to your office to get your badge, or to the security desk for a temporary pass." The woman stopped walking and turned to face him fully for the first time. She had dark brown eyes that flashed with irritation. "Look, what's your name?" "Samuel Green, ma'am." "Well, Mr. Green, I am Dr. Watson, and I have a patient who needs emergency surgery. Every minute counts." Samuel stood his ground. "I understand the urgency, Dr. Watson, but I can't make exceptions. Hospital policy is clear about identification in restricted areas." She stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "Fine, I'll get my badge." But instead of turning around, she continued walking deeper into the restricted area. "Ma'am, Dr. Watson, I need you to stop," Samuel called after her. She ignored him, walking faster now. Samuel felt his frustration growing. Why was this so difficult? If she really was a doctor, she should understand security protocols better than anyone. He followed her through another set of doors. They were, now, in a hallway with patient preparation rooms. A nurse looked up in surprise as they passed. "Dr. Watson, do you need something?" the nurse asked. So she really was a doctor. Samuel felt a twinge of doubt, but pushed it aside. Doctor or not, rules applied to everyone. "Dr. Watson," Samuel said firmly, "I need you to return to public areas until you have proper identification." She spun around. "Are you serious, right? Now? There are crash victims coming in, and I need to check on my patient who's scheduled for emergency surgery." "I'm just doing my job," Samuel insisted. "Security protocols. Do you stop every doctor without a visible badge?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "Or just the ones who look like me?" Samuel felt his face grow hot. "This has nothing to do with how you look. It's about following hospital rules." A commotion down the hall caught their attention. Gurneys with the car crash victims were being wheeled in, medical staff rushing alongside them. Dr. Watson turned away from Samuel and moved toward the emergency. He reached for her arm without thinking. "Ma'am, you can't—" Dr. Watson yanked her arm away. "Take your hands off me," she shouted, loud enough that several people turned to look. The hallway fell silent for a beat, despite the emergency unfolding. Samuel felt every eye on him, standing there in his security uniform, facing down a woman he'd just prevented from helping with an emergency. A nurse with graying hair hurried over. "Dr. Watson, there you are." She looked between them with confusion. "Is everything okay?" "No, Nurse Chen, it's not," Dr. Watson said coldly. "This security guard seems to think I don't belong in my own surgical wing because I forgot my badge." Nurse Chen's eyes widened. "Mr. Green, this is Dr. Diana Watson, our chief of surgery." Samuel felt the floor tilt beneath him. Chief of surgery? His mouth went dry. Dr. Watson gave him one last icy glare. We'll discuss this tomorrow. My office, 8 a.m. She turned and walked toward the emergency, Nurse Chen hurrying after her. Samuel stood frozen in place as medical staff rushed around him. Chief of Surgery. He had just tried to remove the Chief of Surgery from her own department. His radio crackled, but he barely heard it. All he could think was that his fresh start had just gone terribly wrong. Samuel couldn't sleep when he got home. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. The look on Dr. Watson's face, the way everyone stared at him, the sinking feeling when he realized who she was. "You really messed up this time," he muttered to himself as he made coffee the next morning. Lily was still asleep. It was only 6 a.m., but Samuel couldn't stay in bed any longer. He had called Mike Tanner last night to explain what happened. Mike had sighed heavily. "Dr. Watson can be difficult," Mike had said. "But she's brilliant, and the board loves her. Just apologize and move on." Samuel wasn't so sure it would be that simple. There had been something in her eyes when she looked at him, something that went beyond just being annoyed at a security guard. At 7:45 a.m., Samuel stood outside Dr. Watson's office door. His uniform was perfectly pressed. His shoes shined. He took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," a firm voice called. Dr. Watson looked different today. She wore a white doctor's coat over a blue dress. Her hair was neatly styled, and a hospital ID badge hung visibly from her pocket. Behind her desk were framed diplomas and awards that covered nearly the entire wall. "Mr. Green," she said coolly, "please sit down." Samuel sat, back straight, hands on his knees. "Dr. Watson, I want to apologize for—" She held up her hand, stopping him. "Before you apologize, I'd like to understand exactly what happened last night, from your perspective." Samuel nodded. He explained step by step, seeing someone without visible ID in a restricted area, following protocol by asking for identification, and the situation escalating when she wouldn't comply. "I was just following hospital security protocols," he finished, "but I should have handled it better. I apologize for grabbing your arm." Dr. Watson studied him. "Would you have stopped a white man in a suit the same way?" The question hit Samuel like a punch to the gut. Yes. Anyone without visible ID in a restricted area." "Really?" Her eyebrows raised. "Because Dr. Phillips walks around without his badge all the time. So does Dr. Monroe. Have you stopped them?" Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "I haven't seen them in restricted areas without badges." "Or maybe you didn't notice them the same way you noticed me," she said sharply. Samuel felt defensive. "This isn't about race, Dr. Watson. It's about security protocols. It's always just protocols until you're the one being followed around stores, or pulled over for no reason, or asked if you really belong somewhere." Her voice remained calm, but her eyes flashed. "Do you know how many times I've been mistaken for a nurse, or asked to clean something, or questioned about being in the doctor's lounge?" Samuel didn't know what to say to that. Dr. Watson continued. "Yesterday, I was rushing because a patient needed emergency surgery. I usually keep my badge clipped to my belt, but I was called in from home and forgot it in my rush. Instead of helping me get to my patient, you became an obstacle." Samuel felt ashamed, but also confused. "I was trying to protect the hospital. That's my job." "Protect it from what?" "From me?" she asked. "From anyone who doesn't follow protocols," Samuel insisted. "How was I supposed to know you were the chief surgeon?" "You weren't," she admitted. "But when I told you I was a doctor, you didn't believe me." "You were in regular clothes," Samuel pointed out. "Because I was called in from home for an emergency." "They're Voices had gotten louder. Samuel took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm sorry for how things happened," he said carefully. "But what should I have done differently? Just let anyone who claims to be a doctor walk into restricted areas?" Dr. Watson seemed surprised by the question, like she expected him to just back down completely. After a moment, she sighed. "No, that wouldn't be good security," she admitted. "But there are better ways to handle the situation than following me through 3 hallways and putting your hands on me." Samuel nodded slowly. "You're right about that part. I should never have touched you." That was wrong. A knock at the door interrupted them. Nurse Chen poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Watson, but they're ready for you in OR 3. "Thank you, Chen. I'll be right there." Dr. Watson stood up. "Mr. Green, I have surgery now, but this conversation isn't finished." Samuel stood too, uncertain what that meant for his job. "Am I fired?" Dr. Watson looked surprised. "Fired? No, but I expect you in this office tomorrow at the same time. We clearly have more to discuss." As she gathered her things, Samuel noticed a photo on her desk. Dr. Watson standing with an older couple who looked proud, likely her parents. Dr. Watson caught him looking at the photo. Something in her expression softened slightly. "My father was a security guard for 30 years at a university," she said unexpectedly. "He taught me that good security isn't just about stopping people. It's about making the right people feel safe while keeping the wrong people out." Samuel nodded. "That sounds like wisdom. My dad was a cop. He said something similar." For a brief moment, something passed between them. A small connection, quickly gone. Then Dr. Watson's professional mask returned. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m., she reminded him, walking to the door. As Samuel left the hospital, his emotions were mixed. He wasn't fired, not yet anyway, but he didn't feel relieved either. Dr. Watson's words about being questioned and doubted stuck with him. Had he treated her differently? Would he have been so insistent with someone else? He thought about his daughter Lily and how the world might treat her as she grew up. Would people question her belonging places too? The thoughts followed him all the way home, where more trouble was waiting. Samuel's apartment building came into view. An old brick building with fire escapes zigzagging down its sides like metal snakes. As he climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, his neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez opened her door. "Samuel! Thank goodness you're home." Her face was creased with worry. "Lily had a bad day at school. She's been crying since I picked her up." Samuel's heart sank. After everything that had happened at work, now something was wrong with Lily too? "What happened?" he asked quickly. Mrs. Rodriguez lowered her voice. "Some kids were making fun of her. Something about her science project. She wouldn't tell me all of it." "Thanks for watching her, Mrs. Rodriguez," Samuel said, heading to his apartment door. "I appreciate everything you do for us." Inside, he found Lily curled up on the couch, hugging her favorite stuffed elephant. Her eyes were red and puffy. "Hey, kiddo," Samuel said gently, sitting beside her. "Rough day?" Lily looked up at him. "Jake and Zoe said my project was stupid. They said girls can't be doctors, especially girls like me." Her voice was small and hurt. Samuel felt a flash of anger, quickly replaced by sadness. "That's not true, Lily. Not one bit of it." "But they said they're wrong," Samuel said firmly. "Remember that doctor I told you about from the hospital? Dr. Chen? She's an amazing doctor. And there are lots of other women doctors too, with all kinds of backgrounds." Lily wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Really? Really?" Samuel thought about Dr. Watson, with all her diplomas and awards. In fact, the chief surgeon at my hospital, the boss of all the surgeons, is a black woman, and she's one of the most respected doctors there. Lily's eyes widened a little. The chief? Like, the most important one? Exactly, Samuel nodded. No one tells her she can't be a doctor. Lily seemed to think about this. Can I meet her someday? Samuel hesitated, remembering the icy look in Dr. Watson's eyes. Maybe someday. Let's get some dinner, okay? After tucking Lily into bed later that night, Samuel sat at the kitchen table staring at his laptop. He couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Dr. Watson. Had he treated her differently because of how she looked? He didn't want to believe it. He wasn't that kind of person. Was he? He opened a new tab and typed, Dr. Diana Watson, Chief Surgeon City, Memorial Hospital. The search results showed dozens of articles. Dr. Watson giving speeches at medical conferences, Dr. Watson receiving awards, Dr. Watson pioneering new surgical techniques. There she was in photos, always professional, always confident. One headline caught his eye. Dr. Diana Watson discusses challenges for women of color in medicine. He clicked and read, Even now, I'm frequently mistaken for support staff, Dr. Watson said during the panel. I've had patients refuse to believe I'm their surgeon. I've had family members ask to speak to the real doctor while I'm standing. There with my medical degree and 20 years of experience. Samuel sat back, feeling uncomfortable. He scrolled to another article about Dr. Watson introducing a mentoring program for young girls interested in medicine. I want them to see someone who looks like them in these roles, Dr. Watson explained, so they never doubt they belong there. Samuel thought of Lily and her tears today. Would seeing someone like Dr. Watson help her believe in herself more? He closed his laptop and rubbed his tired eyes. Had he been like those patients who doubted Dr. Watson? He hadn't refused to believe she was a doctor because of her race? Had he? He'd been following protocols. But why had he been so quick to doubt? Her? Samuel couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind replaying the confrontation in the hospital hallway. Then, other memories surfaced. Uncomfortable ones from his police days, like the time his partner had stopped a black teenager for looking suspicious when he was just walking home from school with headphones on. Samuel hadn't said anything, even though it hadn't felt right. Or the time they'd gotten a call about a suspicious person in an upscale neighborhood who turned out to be a professor who lived there, checking his own mail. Samuel had always told himself he was just doing his job, following protocols. But now, in the darkness of his bedroom, he wondered if staying silent had made him part of the problem. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mike Tanner. How'd the meeting with Dr. Watson go? Still have your job? Samuel texted back, Not fired. Meeting again tomorrow. Mike replied, Lucky. She's got a reputation for being tough but fair. If she keeps you on, you might be on security detail for the hospital fundraiser next week. Big donors, fancy food, the works. Samuel put his phone down, not really caring about the fundraiser. His mind was on bigger questions now. When his alarm went off the next morning, Samuel had barely slept. He got Lily ready for school, trying to be extra cheerful to make up for her bad day yesterday. Dad, are you okay? Lily asked as he poured cereal into her bowl, missing and spilling some on the table. Just tired, kiddo. Didn't sleep well. He smiled at her. Hey, remember what I told you. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't be, okay? Lily nodded seriously. Dad? If I wanted to be a doctor someday, could I be one like that chief lady you told me about? Samuel felt something catch in his throat. Yes, Lily. You absolutely could. After dropping Lily at school, Samuel headed to the hospital for his second meeting with Dr. Watson. He still didn't know what she wanted to discuss, but he felt different today, less defensive, more open to hearing her perspective. As he walked through the hospital lobby, he passed a wall he hadn't noticed before. It displayed photos of the hospital's department heads. In the center was Dr. Watson's portrait, captioned, "Dr. Diana Watson, MD, PhD, Chief of Surgery." Samuel stopped and really looked at her photo. The confident smile, the determined eyes, the same woman he'd tried to remove from her own surgical wing. He continued to her office, knocked on the door, and entered when she called. Today, Dr. Watson wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit sat across from her desk. "Mr. Green," Dr. Watson said formally. "This is Mr. Phillips from the hospital board. We need to discuss an important security matter with you." Samuel's stomach dropped. Maybe he was going to be fired after all. "Please, sit down," Mr. Phillips said, gesturing to the empty chair. He was tall and thin with silver hair and glasses that made his eyes look bigger than they were. Samuel sat, trying to keep his expression neutral despite the worry churning in his stomach. His mind raced with what he would tell Lily if he lost this job. How would he pay rent next month? "Mr. Green," Dr. Watson began, "I've been reviewing the security protocols for the hospital, and I've noticed some gaps." Samuel blinked in surprise. This wasn't what he expected. "Gaps?" he repeated. Mr. Phillips nodded seriously. "Dr. Watson brought some concerns to my attention after your encounter yesterday." Here it comes, Samuel thought. The complaint. The dismissal. "Your security team has been enforcing ID policies inconsistently," Dr. Watson continued. "Some staff members are stopped regularly, while others rarely get checked, even without visible badges." Samuel frowned slightly. "Ma'am, I've only been here a few weeks, but I try to check everyone who—" "This isn't about you specifically," she interrupted. "It's a system-wide issue. And after our discussion yesterday, I realized you might have insights that could help us improve." Samuel looked between them, confused. "I'm not sure I understand." Mr. Phillips leaned forward. Dr. Watson suggested that instead of disciplinary action regarding yesterday's incident, we should use it as an opportunity to review and strengthen our security procedures. He smiled thinly. "The board agrees. We need security that keeps everyone safe while treating everyone with respect." Samuel couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "So, I'm not being fired?" Dr. Watson's mouth twitched like she might almost smile. "No, Mr. Green. Instead, I'd like you to work with me on improving our protocols." Relief washed over Samuel, quickly followed by confusion. "Why me? After what happened?" "Because you were doing your job," Dr. Watson said simply. "Perhaps too enthusiastically." Her eyes flashed with something, maybe a hint of humor. "But you were following protocols as you understood them, and you didn't back down, even when challenged by someone with authority." Mr. Phillips nodded. "Those are valuable qualities in security. We just need to channel them correctly." Samuel wasn't sure what to say. "Thank you for the opportunity." "Don't thank me yet," Dr. Watson warned. "I expect this won't be comfortable for either of us." After Mr. Phillips left, Samuel remained in Dr. Watson's office. An awkward silence stretched between them. "I researched you last night," Samuel finally admitted. "I read about your work and the challenges you've faced." Dr. Watson raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" "Yes, and it made me think about things differently." Samuel took a deep breath. "My daughter Lily came home crying yesterday because kids at school told her girls like her, couldn't be doctors. I told her about you. Something in Dr. Watson's expression softened slightly. How old is your daughter? 10. She's smart, loves science, and asking questions about everything. Pride crept into Samuel's voice. I told her the chief surgeon at my hospital is a black woman, and no one tells her she can't be a doctor. Dr. Watson looked at the photo on her desk, the one with her parents. My father wanted me to be a doctor since I was 5. He worked double shifts as a security guard to help pay for my education. She looked back at Samuel. No one in my family had gone to college before me. Samuel nodded. That's impressive. It shouldn't have to be impressive to overcome obstacles that shouldn't exist, she said firmly. That's why I want to fix things here. Small things, like security protocols, might seem minor, but they're part of a bigger picture. Samuel thought about this. You know, in the police department, we had protocols too, but sometimes they weren't applied the same way to everyone. He hesitated. I saw things I should have spoken up about. Is that why you left the force? Dr. Watson asked. Directly. Samuel looked down at his hands. There was an incident. A teenager was stopped for matching a vague description. Things escalated quickly. My partner used excessive force. I didn't stop it in time. The memory still haunted him. The kid ended up in the hospital. I reported what happened, but they closed ranks. Nothing changed except I became the bad guy for speaking up. Dr. Watson studied him. That couldn't have been easy. The system protected itself, Samuel said. After that, I couldn't be part of it anymore. And now you're in another system, Dr. Watson observed. Hospitals have their own problems, Samuel nodded. Every place does, I guess. But at least here, the goal is helping people. Yes, Dr. Watson agreed. And that's why we need to get this right. She pulled out a folder. These are complaints about security interactions from the past year. Read them, then we'll talk about solutions. Samuel took the folder. I want to help make things better. Good. Dr. Watson checked her watch. I have surgeries scheduled for the rest of today. We'll meet again tomorrow. She stood up. And Samuel, thank you for being honest. As he left her office, Samuel felt oddly lighter. He hadn't expected the conversation to go this way. Instead of losing his job, he had been given a chance to fix something broken. In the cafeteria, he opened the folder and began reading. The complaints painted a troubling picture. Staff members with darker skin reported being stopped and questioned about their access 3 times more often than their white colleagues. Visitors to patients in certain zip codes faced more scrutiny than others. Samuel sighed. The patterns were hard to ignore once you looked for them. Heavy reading? He looked up to see Nurse Chen with her lunch tray. Just some work stuff, Samuel said, closing the folder. Nurse Chen sat down across from him. You know, we were all surprised Dr. Watson didn't have you fired. She doesn't usually give second chances. Why did she give me one? Samuel asked. Nurse Chen smiled mysteriously. Maybe she saw something in you, or maybe. She lowered her voice. Maybe she needs allies for the changes she wants to make. The board doesn't always listen to her, even though she's brilliant. Samuel thought about that as he finished his shift. Maybe they could help each other after all. He had a lot to think about before their meeting tomorrow. The next few weeks changed everything for Samuel. What had started as an uncomfortable partnership with Dr. Watson gradually transformed into something unexpected. A collaboration built on growing mutual respect. Their first project was revising the hospital's security protocols. Samuel spent hours in Dr. Watson's office, discussing ways to make security both effective and fair. The key is consistency, Samuel explained during one meeting. Everyone gets checked the same way. every time. No exceptions for anyone. Not doctors, not board members, not even the hospital director. Dr. Watson nodded thoughtfully. And better training for security staff about unconscious bias. Exactly, Samuel agreed. Plus a clear complaint process that actually gets results. They worked well together, despite occasional disagreements. Dr. Watson was direct, sometimes painfully so, but she listened to his ideas. Samuel found himself looking forward to their meetings. One afternoon, as they finished reviewing the new badge system proposal, Dr. Watson checked her watch. "We've been at this for 3 hours," she said, surprised. "I didn't realize it was so late." Samuel stretched his arms above his head. "Time flies when you're fixing institutional problems," he joked. To his surprise, Dr. Watson actually smiled. It changed her whole face, softening the serious lines around her eyes. "I have surgery in 20 minutes, she said, gathering her papers. "But I wanted to ask, how's your daughter? Lily, right?" Samuel smiled at the mention of his daughter's name. "She's doing better. Her science project won first place in her class." Good for her. What was her project about? The human heart. She built a model showing how blood flows through the chambers. Samuel pulled out his phone to show her a photo of Lily, standing proudly next to her project. "She wants to be a doctor now. Thanks to you, actually." Dr. Watson looked surprised. "To me? We've never met." "I told her about you," Samuel explained. "When those kids said girls like her couldn't be doctors, knowing you exist made a difference to her." Dr. Watson was quiet for a moment. "Representation matters," she finally said. "I had no black women doctors to look up to when I was her age. Not in real life, anyway." Samuel hesitated before asking, "Was it very hard, becoming a surgeon when people didn't expect you to succeed?" Dr. Watson considered the question. "Medical school was actually easier than what came after. I excelled at the academics. That part I could control through hard work. It was the constant small battles that were exhausting." She leaned back in her chair. "Being mistaken for support staff. Having patients request a different doctor. Being told I was too aggressive when male colleagues were praised for being assertive. Having to prove myself over and over." Samuel nodded slowly. "I can't imagine dealing with that every day." "You get used to it," she said with a small shrug. "But you shouldn't have to." A comfortable silence fell between them. Samuel realized how much their relationship had changed since that first confrontation in the hallway. "Can I ask you something personal?" Samuel ventured. Dr. Watson raised an eyebrow. "You can ask. I might not answer. Do you like baseball?" The question was so unexpected that Dr. Watson actually laughed. "Baseball? That's your personal question?" Samuel grinned. "I have tickets to the game this weekend. Lily and I go whenever we can. The hospital gets some tickets for staff. I checked the list, and there are 2 still available." Dr. Watson studied him for a moment. "Are you inviting me to a baseball game, Mr. Green?" "The Tigers are playing the Yankees," he said. "It'll be a good game." "I haven't been to a baseball game in years," she admitted. "So is that a yes?" Samuel asked. Dr. Watson smiled slightly. "Maybe. I'll check my schedule." To Samuel's surprise, she did come to the game. Lily was starstruck meeting the real-life chief surgeon her father had told her about. Dr. Watson, "Call." Me, Diana, outside the hospital, she'd insisted, was patient with Lily's endless questions about becoming a doctor. When Lily went to get popcorn with Samuel, Diana leaned over to him. "She's brilliant and determined. Reminds me of myself at that age." Samuel smiled proudly. "She's my whole world." "You're doing a good job with her," Diana said sincerely. As they watched the game, Samuel noticed how Diana relaxed away from the hospital. She knew baseball surprisingly well, cheering at the right moments and groaning at bad calls before he did. "My dad loved baseball," she explained when he commented on it. "We watched every Tigers game together when I was growing up. It was our thing." "Lily's mother wasn't into sports," Samuel said, "but Lily and I made it our tradition after she passed." Diana's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your wife." "Cancer," Samuel said quietly. "It was quick, just 6 months from diagnosis. Lily was 8. Diana nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's one battle I lose too often as a doctor. Cancer doesn't care who you are or what plans you had." They fell silent, watching the game. The Tigers were winning. "Thank you for inviting us," Diana said after a while. "It's nice to remember there's a world outside the hospital." Back at work, their professional relationship continued to grow stronger. The new security protocols were approved by the hospital board with only minor changes. Security staff received additional training on consistent enforcement. Samuel was promoted to lead the day shift, which meant more regular hours with Lily. He suspected Diana had something to do with it, though she never said so. One evening, as they wrapped up a meeting about the upcoming hospital fundraiser, Diana asked, "Do you ever miss being a police officer?" Samuel considered the question carefully. "I miss feeling like I was making a difference in the community. But I don't miss the culture that protected bad behavior." He looked at her. "Here, I feel like we're actually fixing problems, not just putting bandages on them." Diana nodded. "That's why I went into medicine, to fix things." She gathered her papers. "The fundraiser is tomorrow night. You'll be supervising security?" "Yes, ma'am," Samuel said with a mock salute that made her roll her eyes. "Good. I need someone I can trust there." She headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Samuel? Make sure you check everyone's ID, even mine." Samuel grinned. "Yes, Dr. Watson." Neither of them knew that the fundraiser would bring an unexpected challenge, one that would test their new partnership in ways they couldn't imagine. The hospital's main lobby had been transformed for the fundraiser. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. White tablecloths covered round tables where the city's wealthiest residents sat in fancy clothes. A small orchestra played soft music in the corner. Samuel stood near the entrance in his best uniform, checking guest IDs against the invitation list. He felt stiff in his dress uniform, but Diana had insisted that security look professional for the donors. "These people are giving millions to the hospital," she had explained. "They need to feel their money is going to a top-notch facility." Samuel spotted Diana across the room in a deep blue evening gown. She moved confidently between tables, shaking hands and charming donors. This was a different side of her. The public face of the hospital, smoothly navigating the social waters. "Mr. Green, is everything secure?" Hospital Director Wilson appeared at his elbow. "Yes, sir," Samuel replied. "All entrances are covered, and we have extra staff patrolling the hospital." "Excellent." Director Wilson nodded. "Tonight is crucial for the hospital's future. Dr. Watson is announcing the new children's surgical wing. We need $8 million to make it happen." Samuel watched as Diana clinked a glass with a spoon, calling for attention. The crowd quieted as she stepped onto the small stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight," she began. "City Memorial Hospital has served this community for over 50 years." As Diana spoke passionately about the hospital's mission, Samuel noticed a man slip through a side door. He wore a rumpled suit that didn't quite fit, and he kept looking around nervously. Something about him set off Samuel's internal alarm. "Jenkins," Samuel whispered to another security guard. "Keep an eye on this section. I need to check something. Samuel moved quietly along the wall, keeping the nervous man in sight. The man hadn't approached any of the tables. Instead, he hovered near the hallway that led toward the surgical wing. Diana was still speaking. The new children's surgical wing will allow us to help thousands more kids each year. The man pulled something from his pocket and checked it, then glanced at his watch. He started walking purposefully toward the hospital's main building. Samuel followed at a distance. The man pushed through a set of double doors, then broke into a jog down the hallway toward the surgical wing. Samuel picked up his pace, following. His radio crackled. "Green, what's your status?" Following a suspicious individual heading toward surgery, Samuel replied quietly. Male, mid-30s, brown suit, acting nervous. Need backup? Samuel hesitated. Stand by. Not confirmed as a threat yet. The man stopped outside the surgical observation area, where family members could watch operations through a glass window. A surgery was in progress. Samuel could see a team of doctors and nurses gathered around a patient. Diana was the lead surgeon. Samuel recognized her even in surgical mask and gown. She had mentioned an important surgery scheduled right after her fundraiser speech, a child with a rare heart condition. She must have changed quickly and gone straight to the operating room. The man pressed his face to the glass, watching intently. Samuel noticed something bulging under his jacket, something that could be a weapon. Samuel's heart raced. What if this man meant to harm someone? What if he was targeting Diana? There had been incidents at hospitals before, disgruntled family, members blaming doctors for bad outcomes. He had to make a decision. If he called for backup and created a scene, it could disrupt the life-saving surgery happening right now. If the bulge was indeed a weapon and he did nothing, lives could be in danger. Samuel thought of his police training. Assess the threat. Observe before acting. He approached slowly, positioning himself where he could intervene quickly if needed. "Excuse me, sir," Samuel said calmly. "Can I help you find something?" The man jumped, startled. I'm just watching." "Do you have family in surgery?" Samuel asked, noting the man's shaking hands. "My daughter," the man whispered, his voice breaking. "Ella. She's 7. They're fixing her heart." Samuel's eyes moved to the observation window, then back to the EEV bulge under the man's jacket. "Sir, I need to ask what you have under your coat." The man looked confused, then followed Samuel's gaze. "Oh, this?" He pulled out a folded umbrella and a stuffed unicorn toy. "It's Ella's favorite. I wanted to have it ready when she wakes up." Relief washed over Samuel. "I'm sorry for the concern, sir. Hospital security," he explained, showing his badge. The man nodded, too worried about his daughter to care much. "They said Dr. Watson is the best, that she's done this surgery before when no one else would try." His eyes filled with tears. "Ella's all I have." Samuel looked through the window at Diana, her hands steady as she performed the delicate procedure. "Your daughter is in good hands," he said sincerely. The man clutched the unicorn tighter. "I know. I just needed to see for myself." Samuel stayed with him, watching the surgery. His radio crackled again. "Green? Status update?" "False alarm," he replied. "Family member of a patient. Everything's secure." As they watched, Samuel noticed something strange. A nurse entered the operating room and handed something to another staff member. The package seemed odd, too small for surgical tools and wrapped in plain brown paper rather than sterile packaging. The staff member slipped the package into their pocket quickly, glancing around nervously. Samuel frowned. Hospital protocols were strict about what could enter an operating room. Everything had to be properly sterilized and documented. "Sir, would you excuse me for a moment? There's a water fountain and chairs just down that hallway, if you'd like, to wait more comfortably." The man nodded, eyes still fixed on his daughter's surgery. Samuel stepped away and quietly spoke into his radio. "Jenkins, I need to check something in the pharmacy records. Can you send someone to monitor the surgical observation area? There's a father watching his daughter's surgery. He's no threat, but I want someone to stay with him." "Copy that. Anderson is on her way." Samuel headed to the hospital pharmacy, which should have been closed at this hour except for emergency dispensing. Yet as he approached, he saw the lights were on. Through the window in the door, he could see Mike Tanner, his boss, talking with the same staff member who had been in the operating room. Something wasn't right. Mike wasn't supposed to be on duty tonight. And what was in that package? Samuel stepped back around the corner, thinking. He could confront them directly, but if something illegal was happening, he might scare them off before finding out what was going on. Instead, he quietly texted Diana. "Something strange happening near pharmacy. Staff from your OR involved. Need to talk after surgery." Then he positioned himself where he could watch without being seen, waiting for Diana's surgery to finish. Whatever was happening, he needed more information before acting. What Samuel didn't know was that he had just stumbled onto a problem much bigger than one suspicious package. A problem that would soon force him and Diana to make an impossible choice. Samuel waited outside the operating room as Diana finished the heart surgery. His mind raced with possibilities. What was Mike Tanner doing in the pharmacy after hours? What was in that package? And why was a surgical staff member involved? After 2 hours, Diana emerged from the operating room, still in her surgical cap, but having removed her gown. She looked tired, but satisfied. The surgery was successful, she told the waiting father, who burst into tears of relief. "Ella will need to stay in intensive care for a few days, but she's going to be just fine." The father hugged the unicorn toy to his chest. "Thank you, Dr. Watson. Thank you so much." After speaking with the father, Diana spotted Samuel waiting nearby. She walked over, her expression changing from professional compassion to concern. "What's the emergency?" she asked quietly. Samuel led her to an empty consultation room and closed the door. "I saw something strange during the surgery. A staff member, I think it was Nurse Rodriguez, brought an unmarked package into your operating room. Then she took it to the pharmacy, where she met with Mike Tanner." Diana frowned. "Nurse Rodriguez was assisting me, but I didn't notice any package. It was small, maybe the size of a cell phone, brown paper wrapping. She passed it to someone else, who pocketed it quickly." Diana's frown deepened. "That doesn't follow any hospital protocol I know of. Nothing enters an operating room without proper sterilization and documentation." "Exactly," Samuel agreed. "And Mike shouldn't have been in the pharmacy at all tonight. He was supposed to be overseeing security for the north entrance of the fundraiser." Diana thought for a moment. "Let's check the pharmacy inventory log. If medications are being taken, there should be a record." They walked to the hospital's records office. Diana used her access code to pull up the pharmacy database. "Look for any patterns," she suggested. "Discrepancies between what's ordered and what's used." Samuel scanned the records, using his security training to spot irregularities. "Here," he said after a few minutes. "Pain medications, specifically fentanyl and oxycodone. The numbers don't add up." Diana leaned closer to see. "You're right. The pharmacy has been ordering more than our patient records show we're using, but the extra doses aren't being logged as waste or expired." "They're disappearing," Samuel said grimly. "How long has this been happening?" Diana checked the historical data. "At least 6 months. maybe longer. Samuel sat back, running a hand over his face. Someone's stealing pain medications from the hospital. And based on what I saw tonight, Mike Tanner is involved. This is serious, Diana said. These are controlled substances. We need to report this to the hospital board and the police. Samuel nodded slowly, but something was bothering him. Mike's been head of security for years. He has a spotless record. Why would he risk everything to steal medications? Diana had no answer, but her expression was troubled. We need more information before we make accusations. Can you check the security footage for the pharmacy tonight? I'll do it right now, Samuel said. In the security office, Samuel accessed the camera recordings. Diana stood behind him, watching the screen. The footage clearly showed Mike entering the pharmacy with a key card, followed by Nurse Rodriguez delivering a small package. They exchanged words, then Mike placed the package in a larger box hidden behind some supplies. There's our proof, Diana said quietly. Samuel kept watching. To his surprise, Mike pulled out his wallet and handed Nurse Rodriguez what looked like cash. He's paying her, Samuel said. This isn't just taking medications, he's selling them. Diana's expression hardened. We need to report this immediately. As she reached for her phone, Samuel noticed something else on the screen. Mike had sat down heavily in a chair, his head in his hands. He seemed to be crying. Wait, Samuel said. Something's not right here. He switched to another camera angle that showed Mike more clearly. The tough security chief was indeed crying, his shoulders shaking. Samuel frowned. I need to talk to him before we call the police. Samuel, we can't just... Please, Diana. 5 minutes. Mike hired me when no one else would. I owe him this much. Diana hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes, but I'm coming with you. They found Mike in his small office, filling out paperwork. He looked up in surprise when they entered. Samuel, Dr. Watson, how was the fundraiser? We need to talk, Mike, Samuel said quietly, closing the door behind them. Mike's expression changed instantly, wariness replacing his friendly smile. What's this about? Samuel took a deep breath. We know about the medications, Mike. We saw you in the pharmacy with Nurse Rodriguez. We've checked the records and the security footage. The color drained from Mike's face. For a moment, Samuel thought he might deny everything or try to run. Instead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. How long have you known? Mike asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We just found out tonight, Diana said. Why, Mike? These medications are for patients who need them. Mike looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. My wife, Sandra, he said. She has pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Samuel felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Cancer? But doesn't your insurance cover her treatment? Mike laughed bitterly. Our insurance only covers treatment at approved hospitals. The only doctor who's had any success with her type of cancer works at a private clinic. Insurance won't pay a penny there. He rubbed his face. The treatments cost $15,000 per month. Our savings were gone after 3 months. So you started selling medications, Diana said, her voice softer now. Mike nodded, shame written across his face. I never took anything patients needed urgently. Just extra doses that wouldn't be missed right away. He looked up at them pleadingly. Sandra was getting better. The tumors were shrinking. For the first time in 2 years, we had hope. Samuel and Diana exchanged glances. This wasn't at all what they had expected. Mike, Samuel said gently, what you're doing is still illegal. People could be hurt by those medications on the street. I know, Mike whispered. I know it's wrong. But what choice did I have? Let my wife die because we can't afford the one treatment that's working? Diana had been quiet, her expression unreadable. Now she spoke. The healthcare system failed you, Mike, but stealing medications isn't the answer. Those drugs could end up killing someone with an addiction. Mike's face crumpled. What am I supposed to do? Sandra needs 2 more months of treatment to finish the protocol. Samuel looked at Diana, who seemed deep in thought. The 3 of them sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Diana straightened. I need to make a call, she said, stepping out of the office. Samuel stayed with Mike, who looked utterly defeated. I'm sorry, Samuel, Mike said. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't see another way. Samuel nodded. I understand doing desperate things to protect someone you love. He thought of his daughter, of what he might do if Lily's life were at stake. Diana returned 10 minutes later, her expression determined. Mike, this is what's going to happen, she said. You're going to resign as head of security, effective immediately. You will return any medications you still have, and you will provide a full accounting of everything that was taken. Mike nodded miserably. I understand. When will the police be here? That's the second part, Diana continued. I've spoken to Hospital Director Wilson. We won't be involving the police. Both men stared at her in shock. Instead, Diana said, we're enrolling Sandra in a clinical trial at City Memorial. As of tomorrow, she's being transferred to my service. The hospital foundation will cover any costs the trial doesn't. Mike's mouth opened, but no words came out. Why would you do this? Samuel asked quietly. Diana met his eyes. Because punishing Mike doesn't fix the real problem. The system is broken. If people have to choose between breaking the law and letting their loved ones die. She turned back to Mike. This doesn't erase what you did, but it gives you a chance to make it right. Mike began to cry, years of stress finally breaking through. Thank you, he managed to say. Thank you. As they left Mike's office, Samuel looked at Diana with new respect. That wasn't what I expected you to do. Diana walked beside him, her surgical cap still on her head. Sometimes healing is more important than punishment, she said quietly. That's something I had to learn as a doctor. Samuel nodded, understanding something important about both Diana and himself. Sometimes the rules weren't enough. Sometimes compassion had to guide the way. 6 months had passed since the night of the fundraiser. The hospital hallways looked the same, but for Samuel Green, everything was different. Samuel straightened his new uniform in the mirror. The patch on his shoulder read, Head of Security, a position he still couldn't believe was his. After Mike's resignation, Hospital Director Wilson had surprised everyone by promoting Samuel rather than bringing in someone from outside. You've shown good judgment and compassion, Wilson had told him. That's exactly what we need. Samuel's office, Mike's old office, had been repainted and reorganized. Photos of Lily covered one wall. On his desk sat a baseball signed by the entire Tigers team. A thank you gift from Diana after he helped organize a special hospital visit for the children's ward. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Diana entered, wearing her white coat over surgical scrubs. They had fallen into an easy friendship since the night they discovered Mike's secret. Ready for the security committee meeting? She asked. Samuel nodded. Just finished the quarterly report. Incident rates are down 30% since we implemented the new protocols. I knew they would be, Diana said with satisfaction. She had championed his security changes with the board, lending her considerable influence to support his ideas. They walked together through the hospital corridors. Staff members greeted them warmly. The tension that had once existed between security and medical staff had eased significantly. "How's Mike's wife doing?" Samuel asked quietly. Diana smiled. "Sandra's latest scan shows no evidence of disease. The clinical trial worked better than we expected." "And Mike?" "He's working at his brother's construction company now. Started a support group for families dealing with cancer. He's finding ways to help others navigate the system he couldn't handle alone." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "He made a mistake, but he's a good man." "Most people are," Diana said. "Put in impossible situations, anyone might make bad choices." They passed the pediatric ward, where a new sign hung above the entrance. The Ella Johnson Children's Wing, named after the little girl whose heart surgery Samuel had witnessed the night of the fundraiser. The fundraiser had exceeded its goal, raising over $10 million. "Dr. Watson!" a cheerful voice called from down the hall. Lily came running toward them, her backpack bouncing against her back. Mrs. Rodriguez followed behind more slowly. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Samuel asked, surprised to see his daughter. "Half day at school," Lily explained. "Mrs. Rodriguez brought me to see your new office. Hi, Dr. Watson." Diana smiled warmly at Lily. Over the past months, she had become something of a mentor to the girl, encouraging her interest in medicine. "Hello, Lily. How's the science club going?" "Great. We're dissecting frogs next week." Lily's face lit up with excitement rather than disgust, making both adults laugh. "Dr. Watson has been helping me with my science fair project," Lily told her father proudly. "It's about how the heart changes as you grow from a baby to an adult." Samuel looked at Diana with gratitude. She had taken time from her busy schedule to mentor his daughter, something he hadn't asked for but appreciated deeply. The hospital's summer program for students interested in healthcare starts next month, Diana mentioned casually. Lily would be perfect for it. Lily's eyes widened. "Really? Can I do it, Dad? Please?" Samuel pretended to think about it, though he already knew his answer. "Well, I suppose if Dr. Watson thinks you're ready." "Yes!" Lily jumped with excitement. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled at the scene. "I'll take her to the cafeteria for lunch while you have your meeting," she offered. After they left, Samuel turned to Diana. "Thank you for including her in the program. It means a lot to her, and to me." Diana shrugged slightly. "She's got a natural curiosity and intelligence. The program needs students like her." Her professional tone couldn't quite hide her affection for Lily. They continued toward the boardroom where the security committee would be meeting. Near the entrance, they passed a wall that had once been blank but now displayed a large sign. "At City Memorial Hospital, everyone belongs." Below it were photos showing the diversity of the hospital staff and patients. "Your idea has made a difference," Diana commented, nodding toward the sign. "New staff members tell me they feel welcome from day one." "It was our idea," Samuel corrected her. "I wouldn't have gotten anywhere without your support." As they neared the boardroom, Samuel spotted a familiar face. The nervous father from the night of the fundraiser, holding the hand of a smiling little girl. Ella had recovered well from her heart surgery, her cheeks now pink with health. "Mr. Johnson," Samuel greeted him. "And Miss Ella, you're looking wonderful." "Mr. Green," Ella said happily. "I remember you. You stayed with my daddy when he was scared." Samuel smiled. "Your daddy was very brave." Mr. Johnson shook Samuel's hand warmly. "We just had our 6-month checkup with Dr. Watson. Ella's heart is perfect." Diana knelt to Ella's level. "And what did I tell you about taking care of that heart? Eat my veggies and run and play every day," Ella recited solemnly, then broke into giggles. After they said goodbye to the Johnsons, Diana checked her watch. We should get to the meeting. Inside the boardroom, hospital department heads and board members were gathering. Samuel took his place at the table, still sometimes surprised to find himself there. When he first started as a security guard, he never imagined he would help shape hospital policy. The meeting began with updates from each department. When Samuel's turn came, he presented his security report confidently. The new ID system was working well. The updated training for security staff had improved interactions with visitors and employees alike. Complaints about security were down by 70%. "Excellent work, Mr. Green," Director Wilson said when he finished. "I believe Dr. Watson has an additional item to discuss." Diana stood and distributed folders to everyone at the table. "I'm proposing a new patient assistance program to help families who fall through the cracks in our healthcare system." Samuel knew what was in the proposal. Diana had discussed it with him many times over coffee in the hospital cafeteria or during their occasional dinners with Lily. The program would help patients like Sandra Tanner, people who needed treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. "We can prevent desperate situations before they happen," Diana explained to the board. "No one should have to choose between breaking the law and losing someone they love." As Diana answered questions from the board members, Samuel watched her with admiration. She fought for what she believed in with a fierce determination that never wavered. Her experiences had shaped her, but hadn't hardened her heart. Samuel thought about how far they had both come since that night in the hospital hallway when he had tried to remove her from her own surgical wing. What had started as a misunderstanding had led to friendship, mutual respect, and real change for the hospital. After the meeting, as they walked back through the hospital hallways, Diana turned to Samuel. "I have tickets to the Tigers game this weekend," she said casually. "Would you and Lily like to come?" Samuel smiled. "We'd love to." Outside the hospital windows, the sun shone brightly. Patients and visitors moved through the lobby, greeted by friendly security staff who checked IDs respectfully and consistently. A banner announced the upcoming community health fair that Samuel had helped organize. As Samuel looked around at all they had accomplished together, he realized something important. Sometimes life's biggest mistakes could lead to unexpected blessings. If you were willing to learn, to grow, and to see people for who they truly were, not just what they seemed to be at first glance. Samuel and Diana walked side by side toward the cafeteria to find Lily, two people from different worlds who had found common ground in their desire to protect and heal. Different approaches, same goal. Different paths, same destination. And in that understanding, they had built something better than either could have created alone. That wraps up our story, Hidden in Plain Sight. I hope you enjoyed this journey of growth, understanding, and compassion between Samuel and Dr. Watson. Where are you listening from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this tale of mistaken judgment turned unexpected friendship, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that challenge perspectives and warm the heart. Every week, we share narratives that remind us to look beyond first impressions. Remember, a little kindness goes a long way. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder that our biggest mistakes can sometimes lead to our greatest growth. Until next time, keep spreading kindness wherever you go.